I understand you two are serious, so let's go for a divorce. Are you okay with that? Yes, thank you. It's perfect timing for a divorce. Now I can go on next week's trip without sneaking around. What a day. It's the perfect timing for a trip with both the pregnancy and the divorce confirmed. It's going to be hard to move around with a big belly, right? That's why we decided to go on a trip now. I was planning to lie and tell you I had a business trip next week. I'm in the process of divorcing my husband after uncovering his affair. It's fine, but since I mentioned divorce, it seems like my husband and his mistress think they can say anything in front of me. They started blabbering about the trip and even the lie they were planning to tell, just to go on it. Their baffling actions continue even after that. Having decided to divorce, I left the house and temporarily stayed in a hotel. An envelope addressed to me arrived. When I opened it, there was a filled-out divorce form. I understand they want to divorce quickly, but to deliver it during a trip. Are my husband and his mistress mocking me? I'm dumbfounded by their actions again, but it's helpful to have the divorce papers first. Got it. I'll file for divorce. I'll also move up the stuff tomorrow, so don't worry. I decided to make these two who take infidelity and divorce lightly realize the severity of their actions. I'm Sienna, a 36-year-old pharmacist. People often assume I've been married for a while and have grown-up kids. However, I'm actually a newlywed, not even a year married to my husband James. Everyone called my marriage a miracle, and I agree. The miracle isn't just that I got married at this age, but also that my husband, 10 years younger and handsome, was part of it. I proudly showed his photo when announcing our marriage. Such a young husband and an older lady like me met at work. I'm not particularly outgoing, and there are many women in my workplace. Most of our pharmacy's customers are elderly, so young men seldom visit. Having no romantic encounters, I realized I was over 30. Though I wanted to marry at some point, I became content with being single as work was fulfilling. About 2 years ago, an unexpected encounter happened. Excuse me, please help me. Sure, I'll take your prescription. At the pharmacy where I work, my then 24-year-old husband came in. He was a salesman and had been in a traffic accident while making his rounds. He was visiting the pharmacy to pick up some patches for his injuries. Handsome men rarely visit, so us ladies secretly got excited. But since my colleagues were married and young men wouldn't be interested in me, we just admired him from afar. We treated him like eye candy, much like watching a cool idol on TV. I handed him the medicine and processed the payment, thinking he was handsome but nothing more. His visits to the pharmacy continued, so he kept coming to my workplace. Sorry, can you help me with this? Sure, I'll take your prescription. As usual, my husband and I only had transactional conversations. This was his third visit to the pharmacy for patches. I figured his treatment would be ending soon, so this might be the last time I get to enjoy the sight of him. As I went to fetch the patches, I noticed a post-it note attached to the prescription. It had a string of letters and numbers, which I initially thought might be some work-related number. However, it's unusual for additional instructions to be written on a note. Curious, I peeled off the note and took a closer look. It appeared to be an ID, possibly for a messaging app. Why is there a contact note on the prescription? I wondered. Confused, I asked my colleagues if this was a directive from the hospital asking to be contacted. My questions stunned my 3 married colleagues. Worried that I had asked something out of the ordinary, I felt embarrassed until they accused me of bragging. One of them even slammed a piece of paper and a pen on the floor, telling me to write down my contact information. Only then did I realize the note was my husband's way of giving me his contact details. I wasn't trying to boast, nor was I oblivious or naive. I simply thought it impossible for him to be passing me his contact information. Now understanding the situation, I hurriedly wrote down my contact details and rushed back to where my husband was waiting. Sorry for the delay. Here's your medication. Thank you. While I handed over the plaster as usual, expecting calmness, my husband received it. The only difference this time was that I had slipped a piece of paper with my contact details into the plaster I handed him. That night, I debated whether or not to contact my husband, staring at my smartphone on the table, its screen dark. I wanted to contact him, but I couldn't muster the courage. Suddenly, my phone lit up and rattled on the table, startling me. It was a message from my husband, inviting me out to dinner. Of course, I had no reason to refuse. He continued to ask me out, and we started dating, leading to marriage after 2 years. When we began dating, I once asked why a young man like him had given his contact details to an older woman like me. I thought you were in your 20s until our first dinner date. What did you think when you found out my age? I was surprised you were older than I thought. Is that all? Yeah, that's it. If I like someone, it's natural to make a move, right? My husband didn't get the meaning behind my question and answered with a question of his own. It seems age doesn't matter to him in love or marriage. At that moment, I felt embarrassed for being so concerned about my age. However, while my age-related worries were resolved, I had another concern about the expenses for our wedding and starting our life together. Should I contribute a bit more? I found it hard to say directly, so I hesitated. I earned significantly more than my husband and had considerable savings. This wasn't because I'm a pharmacist and he's in sales, but simply due to our age difference. Naturally, I wondered if my husband felt uneasy about earning less than his wife. Moreover, being only 26, he couldn't have saved much yet, so I felt bad about him shouldering the costs for our wedding and new life. Why don't we split it 50-50? I'm going to work hard from now on. But, like my worries about age, this too was an unnecessary concern. My husband alleviated all my fears, and by the time we married, I had no more doubts and could genuinely feel happy. My colleagues and friends envied and congratulated me on my marriage. I thought we would lead a happy married life, but soon the situation began to change. The first 3 months of our marriage were blissfully happy. My husband would rush home from work, we'd go out hand in hand on weekends, and he helped with the household chores. The only thing missing for a perfect life was a child, but given my age, I was a bit worried about that. However, having accepted my age, my husband would probably understand. I decided to put the child issue aside for a while and fully enjoy my current happiness. Yet 3 months into our marriage, our blissful newlywed life began to crumble. Are you coming home late again today? I asked. Yeah, it'll be the usual time, I guess. Don't you think you've been coming home too late lately? Sometimes you even miss the last train and have to take a taxi. What, you're complaining even though I'm working hard? No, that's not what I meant. My husband, upset by my words, forcefully closed the front door, making a loud bang. The vibration and air pressure from the door closing knocked over a picture frame of us on the entrance shelf. I gently set the picture frame upright and slowly opened the front door to head to work myself. He's right. It's selfish of me to want him to come home early when he's working hard. But I don't want to be selfish. I just feel anxious because his attitude has changed too much recently. Hey, isn't today the day for burning trash? Isn't it your turn to take it out? Oh, my bad. I'll make sure to do it next time. You said that last time and still forgot, right? It's not a big deal to leave the trash in the house for 2 or 3 days, is it? Of course, it's not okay leaving burning trash for 3 days. Stop nagging. If you have a problem, why don't you do it all yourself? When I addressed this to my husband, who was lounging on the sofa playing with his smartphone, he made an annoyed face and escaped to the bedroom. Before marriage, we decided to share household chores. I know he's not good at housework, but he said even if it's tough, we need to cooperate if we get married, and he set various rules himself. Those rules collapsed 3 months after marriage, and little by little, my role increased. It looks like today, I'll be taking out the trash all by myself. I was originally planning to mainly do the housework, so that's not much of a problem. The problem is that my husband has changed. He used to be so kind before we got married. So why did he change so suddenly? I didn't want to think about the words that were about to pop into my head, so I desperately tried to shake them off. 3 months later, my husband changed more and more, and the situation escalated to more than just needing attention. "James, did you use our money again without asking?" "I just withdrew my share of the salary. I think we need to save for the future, so spending $2,000 or $4,000 a month is questionable. You earn a high salary, and we don't even have kids, so we could live without my salary, couldn't we?" He again lay on the sofa fiddling with his smartphone. He no longer looks at me when talking at home. It seems like his smartphone has become his wife now. It's not me who's always with him, but his smartphone. "Stop looking at your phone all the time and look at me when you're talking. Stop nagging me. Don't talk like my mother." My husband, without taking his eyes off his smartphone screen, walked past me and went into the bedroom. I'm at my wits' end with my husband, who has even stopped contributing financially to the household. Naturally, he continues to come home late every day, and on weekends he goes out alone, no longer spending time with me. Could it be that he's bothered by the fact that I earn a higher salary, and is he frustrated because we're struggling to have children? I reflect on whether I should have been more considerate towards my husband instead of taking his words for granted. But this reflection soon proved to be unnecessary. A few days later, I was at a cafe invited by a friend. It was a beautiful day with a clear view into the distance. As I gazed out the window, I witnessed my husband walking into an obstetrics and gynecology clinic hand in hand with an unfamiliar young woman who looked to be in her early 20s. I gripped my coffee cup so tightly, shocked by the scene, that I thought it might break. This wasn't a coincidence. The friend who invited me to the cafe was a nurse at that clinic. She knew my husband's face and name because I had shown her his picture. She contacted me because she saw my husband entering the clinic with an unknown woman. Of course, she couldn't disclose patient information even to family, so she called me to a cafe with a view of the clinic, suggesting I casually look out the window. I had a hunch about what she meant, so I kept my eyes on the view outside. It was just a coincidence that my husband and the woman happened to arrive there. I wanted to confront them at the clinic, but causing a scene there would be inappropriate. There was also a chance that my husband was simply accompanying a female acquaintance for some reason, so I decided to wait outside the clinic for them to emerge. After my friend left, I waited alone for about an hour in front of the clinic. Was my husband really having an affair? Could his affair partner be pregnant? Or was he just accompanying a friend for her appointment? The hour felt incredibly long as various thoughts raced through my mind. When my husband and the woman finally appeared, I hurriedly confronted them. "Could you please explain why you were at the obstetrics and gynecology clinic? Why are you here?" My husband asked, his eyes wide open, staring at me. Usually, he doesn't look at me and focuses on his smartphone, but now I had his full attention. I turned my gaze to the woman, who looked extremely uncomfortable. Though it wasn't confirmed yet, I braced myself for the possibility of my husband's infidelity. "Can't talk here. Let's move over there," I said, pointing to the cafe where I was just with a friend. We moved to the shop. Even after entering, I didn't start talking right away. To calm myself down, I ordered the same coffee I had an hour ago. I remained silent until the coffee arrived so my husband and the woman couldn't talk either. They both looked anxious, likely intimidated by my silence. When the coffee arrived, I took a sip and finally opened my mouth. "What's the relationship between you two?" I asked. Since my husband always seemed annoyed by my conversations, I decided to jump right into the main issue. At 26 and young, my husband could find relationships anywhere, so I wasn't interested in how or where they started their affair. I could tell when they began their relationship from the changes in my husband's behavior. I only needed to hear the outcome. Well, my husband stammered at my question, obviously flustered. At this point, it seemed clear the woman sitting next to him was his mistress and the person on the other side of the smartphone he was always on. His late returns, not going out together on weekends, and not contributing money to the house were all because of this affair. In my mind, the affair and my husband's changes linked one after another. So, you've been to the gynecologist. Are you pregnant by any chance? Well, my husband fidgeted, unable to answer. Frustrated with no answers from him, my irritation grew, and I drank my coffee faster. Just as I was about to give up and demand a full confession, not my husband but his mistress spoke up. You've been caught. No running away now. We have to clear things up, but still, nice to meet you. I'm Katie. James and I are dating. The last test wasn't conclusive, but today they told me I'm 6 weeks pregnant. Stunned by her sudden revelation, my hand stopped midway as I was about to drink my coffee. Her eyes were serious. She probably saw me as a wall to overcome or a final boss to defeat for her relationship with my husband. Her seriousness was clear, but to me, it just seemed like a brazen admission. Also, hearing her words, my husband seemed to gain misguided courage and started to open up as well. We're serious about this. I feel really bad for you, but can you divorce us for our sake? James, thanks for being clear, but you know it's going to be tough, right? Divorce, childbirth, starting a new life, there's a lot to deal with. I'll be fine as long as I'm with James. With my husband acting like the tragic hero, I almost feel like I'm the final boss for them. I know he's head over heels when he falls in love, but in marriage, if you find someone new, there's a proper way to handle it. I glanced out the window at the obstetric clinic. It seems age does matter in marriage. This isn't to say age gap marriages are bad. It's just that marrying someone with the emotional maturity of a child requires caution. With the affair and her pregnancy out in the open, I'd rather be the one asking for a divorce. But their attitude, like they've done nothing wrong, is infuriating. I can't stand the thought of them defeating the final boss and having their happy ending. I need to let them know how serious their actions are. First, I have to tell them I'm open to divorce. So I see you're serious. Let's go ahead with the divorce. Really. Thank you so much. They hugged and celebrated loudly, drawing stares. I wish they'd remember this as a calf. I'm embarrassed. Good timing with the divorce. Yeah, now we can go on our trip next week without sneaking around. Trip? What trip? It's a perfect time with a pregnancy and divorce confirmed. We thought we should travel before Katie's belly gets too big. I was going to lie to you tonight that I had a business trip next week. I almost dropped my cup, my hand going limp. They think now that I've agreed to divorce, they can say anything in front of me. They blabber on about their trip and lying to me to make it happen. We're getting divorced, right? Aren't there things to discuss? Can't you cancel the trip? That's a bit. Really? You're going to make us cancel? Let us have this trip. I sighed, the biggest one in my life. They're more concerned about their trip than a divorce. Do you understand why we're divorcing? It's because of you too. Let's just decide quickly then. What do we need to decide quickly? Well, it's about dividing assets and your affairs compensation. I guess the apartment's rented, so one of us has to leave, but I'm not staying. I'll move out. How much is the compensation for the affair? Katie, can you look it up? Told by my husband, his mistress took out her phone and began looking up compensation for affairs. What a casual discussion. However, I decided to watch them closely, hoping they'd realize that divorce isn't as easy as they think. The internet says it's between $10,000 and $60,000. That much. Can we settle for $10,000? I'm not a legal expert, but that seems too low. We can decide on the compensation after the divorce. First, let's talk about the house and money since it affects our lives after this, right? You're moving out of the house, right? Then Katie and I will live there. I'll move out right away. I'll move my stuff while you two are on your trip. Next is dividing the assets. It's mainly our savings, right? We haven't been married long, so half each sounds fair. Sounds good. Let's do that. I internally smiled as my husband said exactly what I wanted him to without much effort on my part. This is why divorce discussions shouldn't be rushed. To formalize our conversation, I borrowed some paper and a pen from the cafe and drafted a simple document. It stated our agreement to divorce due to my husband's affair and our decision to split our assets. Unaware, my husband signed my handwritten document. Such a document does have legal weight, so I carefully took it from him without folding it. I'll pack my things and head out first. Take care. Thank you for agreeing to the divorce. I smiled at my husband and his mistress before leaving the cafe. The following week, still searching for a new place, I was living in a hotel. Today, my husband and his mistress were off on their trip, and I planned to clear out the old house with movers tomorrow. Checking my schedule in the hotel, I received a notification about a mail delivery. It was an envelope. Inside was a filled-out divorce form. I understood their eagerness, but sending this during their trip? I sighed but realized it's better for me to have it first. Got it. I'll take care of the divorce and moving out tomorrow. Don't worry. I imagined telling this to my husband's face when they returned. They'd surely be shocked and call me right away. 2 nights later, while relaxing in my hotel, my ex-husband called. What the hell? Everything's gone from the house. Not everything. I left your clothes and games on the floor. I chuckled, imagining his panicked face. In the background, I could hear his mistress's frantic voice. They were probably checking the house. No wonder they were panicking. I stored my belongings from the previous house in a storage unit and sold everything that didn't obviously belong to my husband. Anything that didn't sell, I disposed of. This included furniture, appliances, and even essential items like shower heads and cooking utensils. The house was now as empty as a vacant property waiting for new occupants. Why'd you do this? You better compensate for this. Why should I? I just followed our agreement. We split the assets half after the divorce. You sent the divorce papers, so it's finalized. I just divided the property fairly. What do you mean? The furniture and appliances were shared property. We agreed to split them without specific allocation, so I sold everything and converted it to cash. Isn't your money on the living room floor under your clothes? I could hear hurried footsteps over the phone as my ex-husband rushed to the living room, then a thud as he knelt down, followed by a faint murmur. Wait, $600 and some change. That's all from selling everything in the house. Yes, that's right. Remember, we brought some appliances from our individual homes when we started living together, so most items didn't fetch a high price. Some even cost money to dispose of. Most of the smaller items were unsellable and had to be thrown away. The sound of coins dropping indicated his shock. Even I felt that the total $1,200 was a bit low, but that's expected when using a recycling shop without much thought. Using online auctions or specialized second-hand shops for furniture and appliances might have fetched a higher price, but my goal wasn't to sell high. I wanted to strip my ex-husband of everything necessary for his life and give him as little money as possible, so I used a recycling shop without much thought. How am I supposed to live in a place like this, empty as if no one's ever moved in? That's not my concern. We agreed to split the assets after divorce. The document you signed says so. Any complaints? He fell silent, unable to retort. Regretting the hasty divorce discussion was pointless now, and the discussion wasn't even finished yet. Save your regrets for after everything is settled. You might have forgotten with the trip and the house, but we haven't settled on the compensation for the divorce. That's right. We haven't decided on the compensation yet. Please make it low. I spent a lot on the wedding and starting our life together. I'm almost broke. I even used my money for the trip. Now I've got about $6,000 left. I get you want to impress her, but overspending isn't wise. Unfortunately, I'll be asking for $50,000 in compensation for the affair. $50,000. Our marriage was short, but we're divorcing due to your affair, and she's pregnant. I think it's fair. If you disagree, shall I consult a lawyer?" He fell silent again, realizing the sudden debt in his now empty house must have been overwhelming. Without furniture or appliances, he can't live properly. However, with no money on hand and being only 26 years old, my ex-husband now faces the challenge of paying a substantial amount in compensation. This situation likely means furnishing his home with new furniture and appliances will be a distant prospect. But as a divorcee, his lifestyle is no longer my concern. "I'll contact you later about the compensation." After explaining to my ex-husband why the house was so clean, I hung up the phone. Although I couldn't see his face directly, this should make him realize the gravity of taking affairs and divorce lightly. Later, he agreed to pay a $50,000 compensation for the affair. I consulted a lawyer who suggested I could have asked for more. However, considering his young age and almost penniless state, $50,000 would be a significant enough impact. My intention wasn't about the money. I decided to settle for that amount. The young couple, my ex-husband and his mistress, should ideally have united to build their lives from scratch, but it seems things didn't work out between them. The mistress, a part-timer with no savings, and my ex-husband, left with only about $6,000, led a pitiful life. After the house was emptied, they used cardboard boxes as tables and cooked with a portable stove, a truly miserable living situation. Reportedly, she left the house within a week. With the breakup, my ex-husband now faces definite child support payments. Despite divorcing me with the intention of marrying his mistress, he somehow ended up alone, his financial obligations increasing. His downfall didn't stop there. He had posted pictures of his mistress on social media during their trip, announcing his divorce from me and plans to marry her. Naturally, this sparked inquiries at his workplace. If he admitted the breakup, questions about the reason followed. Despite evading details, rumors about the affair, pregnancy, compensation, and child support spread. The world has its mysterious ways. With a tarnished reputation at work, he couldn't continue his job and resigned. Now, with the need to pay for the affair's compensation, child support, and secure living expenses, he urgently needs to find a new job. Being passionate and straightforward in love is often seen as positive, but considering my ex-husband's actions and current situation, it's a matter for thought. I've learned a lot from this experience. Some people are suited for love, while others aren't. I think neither my ex-husband nor I were suited for it. In today's world, there are various forms of happiness beyond love and marriage. For now, I'm content with my work, focusing on it daily.
What a joke! Derek's mocking voice echoed through the hallway, shattering my world into pieces. You really think that raggedy upcycled garbage is going to sell? Wake up, sis. Raylan's living in a fantasy land. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears as I listened to my husband's scathing words, each one driving a fresh dagger into my soul. This wasn't some stranger criticizing my life's work. This was the man I'd loved and trusted, the father of my child. Harper's giggle cut through the stillness like a knife. Mom's so delusional. She honestly believes people will pay top dollar for old rags sewn together. Tears stung my eyes as the weight of their betrayal crashed down upon me. How could they be so cruel, so dismissive of the passion that fueled every stitch, every design born from repurposed materials? My dream wasn't just some whimsical flight of fancy. It was a commitment to sustainability, to breathing new life into the discarded. As their laughter subsided, I slipped away, my mind racing with a torrent of emotions, hurt, anger, determination. For too long, I'd turned a blind eye to Derek's subtle jabs and Harper's growing resentment. But this was a line crossed, a violation of trust that could never be undone. Later that night, as Derek snored beside me, oblivious to the storm brewing within, I made a decision. No more playing the victim. No more allowing them to trample my dreams underfoot. If they wanted to see me as a joke, I'd give them a punchline they'd never forget. The next morning, I called my best friend, Elise, a former lawyer with a razor-sharp mind. She was the only person I could trust with the truth, and the only one who could help me fight back. "Elise, I need your help," I whispered, glancing over my shoulder to ensure Derek hadn't overheard. "Things with Derek, they're not what they seem." Her voice was a lifeline, a beacon of clarity in the chaos. "Tell me everything." And so I did, laying bare the years of emotional neglect, the financial misdeeds I'd uncovered, and the gut-wrenching betrayal that had shattered my world. With each word, I felt a weight lifting, replaced by a steely resolve to take back control of my life and my business. "We'll make him pay," Elise vowed, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "Every penny he stole, every insult he hurled, he'll answer for it all. Starting today, we document everything." As I hung up the phone, a newfound sense of purpose coursed through my veins. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but I was done being the punchline. It was time to rewrite the joke, and this time, I'd be the one delivering the cutting final line. Elise didn't waste any time. Within days, she'd formulated a meticulous plan to expose Derek's misdeeds and secure my financial future. "First things first," she said during one of our clandestine meetings at a quiet cafe. "We need to document every single transaction he's made using your business accounts." I nodded, pulling out a thick manila envelope stuffed with bank statements and financial records. "I've been gathering evidence for months. Look at these numbers. He's been siphoning funds into his personal accounts, leaving me with just enough to keep the business afloat." Elise's brow furrowed as she flipped through the pages. "That snake, he's been embezzling from you this whole time." "It gets worse." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the next revelation. "I overheard him on the phone with his banker last week. He's been lying about our profits, cooking the books to make it look like we're barely scraping by, so he can claim you're a financial burden and gain leverage in the divorce proceedings," Elise concluded, her jaw clenched tight. "Despicable." Our conversation was interrupted by the shrill ringing of my phone. Derek's name flashed across the screen, and I felt a surge of revulsion. Without hesitation, I declined the call and muted the ringer. Elise's eyes narrowed. What did that weasel want? Probably checking up on me, making sure his little cash cow is still producing. I spat the words like venom, years of pent-up resentment bubbling to the surface. Sliding a worn voice recorder across the table, Elise fixed me with a determined stare. "Start wearing this at all times. We need to catch him in the act, get him on record spewing his vitriol." The weight of the device in my palm felt heavy, a tangible reminder of the war I was waging. But I was done being a victim. It was time to fight back. That night, as Derek and I sat down for dinner, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Harper picked at her food, her gaze flickering between us like a spectator at a boxing match. "What's gotten into you lately?" Derek sneered, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "You've been acting awfully strange." I took a deep breath, pressing the record button beneath the table. "Just focused on the business, that's all." "Just," he scoffed, stabbing at his steak with more force than necessary. "That little hobby of yours? Don't kid yourself, Ray. It's never going to amount to anything more than a drain on our finances." Harper's eyes widened, but she remained silent, no doubt fearing the wrath of her father's sharp tongue. "You know, Derek," I replied, keeping my voice measured and even, "for someone who claims to support my dreams, you sure have a funny way of showing it." His fork clattered against the plate as his fist slammed down on the table. "Support your dreams? Don't make me laugh. Every penny I've wasted on that ridiculous project is a penny too many." The words stung, but I refused to flinch. Instead, I met his venomous glare with a steely gaze of my own. "Well then, it's a good thing you won't have to waste any more of your precious money on me." Rising from the table, I fixed him with a cold smile. "I'll be sure to pack my bags tonight." As I left the room, Derek's sputtering protests fell on deaf ears. The war had begun, and I had no intention of losing. The atmosphere in the house was suffocating. Derek prowled the halls like a caged animal, his footsteps heavy with barely contained rage. Whenever our paths crossed, his eyes bored into me, searching for any sign of weakness, any crack in my resolute facade. But I refused to break. With each snide remark, each thinly veiled insult, I stood my ground, meeting his vitriol with stony silence. The recorder in my pocket became a talisman of sorts, a constant reminder of the evidence I was against him. Harper, caught in the crossfire, retreated into herself. Gone was the carefree teenager who once laughed and joked with her father. In her place was a hollow-eyed shadow, flinching at raised voices and avoiding us both whenever possible. It was during one of these encounters that the dam finally burst. "What's wrong, Princess?" Derek sneered as Harper scurried past, her gaze fixated on the floor. "Cat got your tongue?" She froze, her shoulders tensing, and for a moment I thought she might flee. But then, slowly, she turned to face him, and the look in her eyes sent a chill down my spine. "Just leave me alone," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Derek threw back his head and laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that set my teeth on edge. "What's the matter? Daddy's little girl too good to talk to her old man now?" "Derek, that's enough." I stepped forward, placing a hand on Harper's trembling shoulder. She said, "Leave her alone." His gaze snapped to mine, eyes glittering with malice. "Stay out of this, Raylan. This is between me and my daughter." "Your daughter?" I echoed, my grip tightening on Harper's shoulder. "Since when do you give a damn about being a father? All you care about is yourself and your precious money." The words hung in the air, heavy and damning. For a heartbeat, Derek was speechless, his face contorting with rage. Then, like a coiled serpent, he struck. "How dare you?" he snarled, taking a step forward. "After everything I've done for this family, for your pathetic little hobby, and this is the thanks I get?" Harper flinched, shrinking back against me, but I stood my ground. Reaching into my pocket, I thumbed the record button, capturing every venomous word. "You've done nothing but belittle me, Derek, lie to me, steal from me. You're a despicable excuse for a husband and a father." His face turned an ugly shade of purple, and for a moment, I thought he might strike me. But then, as quickly as it had come, the storm passed, and he deflated like a punctured balloon. "You'll regret this," he hissed, jabbing a finger in my face. "Mark my words, Raylan, I'll make sure you lose everything." With that, he turned on his heel and stormed off, leaving Harper and me alone in the oppressive silence. "Mom?" Her voice was small, tremulous. "What's going on?" Wrapping an arm around her shoulders, I pulled her close, grateful for the solid weight of her against my side. "It's going to be okay, sweetie," I murmured, more for my own benefit than hers. "Everything's going to be just fine." But as I gazed down the hall where Derek had disappeared, a tendril of doubt wormed its way into my heart. Had I underestimated his capacity for cruelty? His willingness to drag us all down in his quest for vengeance? Only time would tell. And in the meantime, I would keep fighting. Keep gathering ammunition for the battle to come. Because one thing was certain. I would never let that man break me again. The day had finally come. With Elise's guidance, I'd compiled an ironclad case against Derek, complete with financial records, audio recordings, and a mountain of damning evidence. There would be no more running, no more hiding. It was time to rip off the mask and expose him for the monster he truly was. "Are you sure about this?" Elise's voice was gentle but laced with steel as we went over the plan one final time. "Once you confront him, there's no going back." I took a deep, steadying breath, my fingers tightening around the thick manila envelope containing the fruits of our labor. "I'm sure. He needs to answer for what he's done." A soft knock at the door shattered the tense silence. "Mom? Elise? It's me, Harper." My heart clenched at the weariness in her voice, a painful reminder of the toll this war had taken on her young spirit. Elise shot me a questioning look, and I nodded, bracing myself for the inevitable explosion. "Come in, sweetie." The door creaked open, and Harper slipped inside, her eyes wide and haunted. "Dad's home," she whispered, wringing her hands. "He's in the living room, waiting for you." My mouth went dry, but I refused to let my nerves show. Squaring my shoulders, I turned to Elise. "It's time." She squeezed my arm, offering a grim smile. "I've got your back, let's do this." With Harper trailing behind, we made our way to the living room, each footstep echoing like a death knell. Derek looked up as we entered, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Elise. "What's going on here?" he demanded, rising to his feet. "What's she doing in my house?" I opened my mouth to respond, but Elise beat me to it. "Sit down, Derek," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "We need to have a little chat." He bristled, his jaw clenching. "I don't take orders from—" "Sit down." Elise's tone brooked no argument, and after a tense moment, Derek lowered himself back onto the couch, his eyes smoldering with barely concealed rage. Sliding the envelope onto the coffee table, I fixed him with an icy glare. These are detailed financial records documenting every single penny you've embezzled from my business over the past 5 years. His eyes widened, but he quickly regained his composure, scoffing dismissively. You're delusional. I've done nothing but support your little hobby. Save it. I jabbed a finger at the envelope. The evidence is right there, plain as day, bank statements, wire transfers, everything. Derek opened his mouth, no doubt to spew forth another round of lies and denials, but I cut him off. That's not all. Pulling out my phone, I queued up the first in a long line of audio recordings. I have hours of footage documenting your emotional abuse, your constant belittling and degradation. As his own voice filled the room, hurling insults and venom with chilling casualness, Derek's face drained of color. Harper gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as she listened to her father's hateful words. No. Derek's voice was little more than a hoarse croak. You can't. That's not. It's over, Derek. Elise's voice was cold, utterly devoid of mercy. We have more than enough evidence to bury you in court. You're going to jail, and Raylan is taking everything, the house, the business, full custody of Harper. You've lost. For a long moment, silence reigned, broken only by the sound of Derek's ragged breathing. Then, slowly, he turned to face me, and the look in his eyes sent ice flooding through my veins. You'll regret this, he hissed, spittle flying from his lips. I swear to God, Raylan, I'll make you suffer for this. You and that little brat will wish you'd never been born. Before I could respond, Harper was there, stepping between us with her shoulders thrown back and her chin raised in defiant challenge. That's enough out of you, she spat, her voice trembling but unwavering. You're the one who's going to suffer, you pathetic excuse for a father, and you'll have no one to blame but yourself. Pride swelled in my chest as I watched my daughter stand tall against the man who'd tormented us for so long. In that moment, I knew we would be okay. We would survive this nightmare, and maybe, just maybe, we'd emerge stronger than ever before. Derek opened his mouth, but whatever vile retort he'd intended died on his lips. With a snarl of impotent rage, he turned and stormed from the room, leaving us standing in silence amidst the wreckage of his shattered lies. It was over. The war had been won. The silence that followed Derek's departure was deafening. Harper and I stood frozen, still processing the explosive confrontation that had just unfolded. Elise was the first to break the stillness, letting out a long, shuddering breath. Well, that could have gone better, she muttered, running a hand through her disheveled hair. Harper whirled on her, eyes blazing with a mixture of hurt and anger. You think? That was my dad you just destroyed back there. Harper, I began, reaching out to her, but she jerked away, hugging herself tightly. Don't. Just don't. Her voice cracked, and I watched in dismay as tears spilled down her cheeks. How could you do this, Mom? How could you keep this from me? The accusation in her tone was like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. Sweetie, I was just trying to protect you. Protect me? She let out a harsh, bitter laugh. From what? The truth? The fact that my own father is a lying, cheating scumbag? Each word lanced through me, raw and agonizing. Elise stepped forward, her expression softening. Harper, your mom did what she had to do to keep you both safe. Derek is a dangerous man, and I don't want to hear it. Harper exploded, whirling on Elise with clenched fists. You have no idea what you've done, what this is going to do to our family. The anguish in her voice cut me to the core. I wanted nothing more than to take her in my arms, to shield her from the pain and betrayal that had torn our lives asunder. But I knew, deep down, that this was a wound that could not be salved with empty platitudes or motherly affection. This was a hurt that ran bone deep, a festering wound that had been ripped open and left to bleed. Harper, please. I tried again, fighting to keep my voice steady. I never wanted to lie to you, but Derek, he was out of control. He was stealing from me, sabotaging my business, and I was afraid if I told you the truth, he might. Might what? She spat, rounding on me with fresh venom. Hurt us? Abandon us? Well, congratulations, Mom, because now he's going to do both of those things, and so much worse. Her words hit their mark, and I flinched as if struck, because deep down I knew she was right. In my quest for justice, for vengeance against the man who had betrayed and belittled me, I had set in motion a chain of events that would undoubtedly tear our family apart. Derek's fury knew no bounds, and now that he had been backed into a corner, exposed as the monster he truly was, there was no telling how far he might go to make us pay. A small, traitorous voice whispered that perhaps it would have been better to simply cut my losses, to walk away and start anew. But I knew, in my heart of hearts, that such a path would have led only to more pain, more suffering at his hands. No, I had done the right thing, the only thing I could do to protect Harper and myself from his toxic influence. But that knowledge did little to dull the ache of my daughter's resentment, the guilt that gnawed at my soul for the turmoil I had thrust upon her. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the words feeling hopelessly inadequate. "I'm so sorry." For a long moment Harper simply stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then, without another word, she turned and fled the room. Leaving me standing amidst the wreckage of our fractured family, Elise's hand found my shoulder, squeezing gently. "Give her time, she'll come around." But as I listened to the distant echo of Harper's footsteps, rapidly retreating, I couldn't help but wonder if the damage I had wrought was too deep, too catastrophic to ever be undone. The divorce proceedings were brutal, a no-holds-barred battle fueled by years of pent-up resentment and betrayal. Derek, his back against the wall, fought like a cornered animal, lashing out with every underhanded tactic in the book. "She's an unfit mother," he snarled during one particularly heated hearing, his eyes boring into me with undisguised hatred. "Manipulative, vindictive. Is that really the kind of influence you want around an impressionable young girl?" I bit back the urge to retaliate, forcing myself to remain composed as Elise rose to my defense. "Your Honor, these baseless accusations are nothing more than a desperate attempt to distract from the real issue at hand, Mr. Collins' repeated embezzlement and financial malfeasance." Derek's face purpled, but before he could unleash another volley of vitriol, the judge intervened. "That's enough, Mr. Collins. I've seen the evidence, and it paints a very clear picture of your actions. Unless you have something of substance to add, I suggest you remain silent." Seething, Derek slumped back in his chair, glowering at me from beneath hooded brows. The message in his eyes was clear. This was far from over. With each passing day, the divisions within our shattered family grew deeper and more pronounced. Harper, caught in the crossfire, retreated further into herself, alternating between bouts of stony silence and explosive outbursts directed at both Derek and me. "I hate you both," she raged one night, hurling a glass against the wall with enough force to shatter it into 1,000 pieces. "You've ruined everything." I flinched as shards exploded around me, piercing my skin with 1,000 tiny lacerations. But the physical pain paled in comparison to the agony of watching my little girl unravel before my eyes. Derek, of course, seized the opportunity to drive the wedge deeper, pulling Harper aside and no doubt filling her head with his twisted version of events. "Don't listen to a word that lying bitch says," I overheard him hiss, his voice dripping with venom. "She's poison, Harper, and she'll only drag you down with her." Part of me wanted to intervene, to shield my daughter from his toxic influence, but a larger, wiser part knew that such actions would only breed more resentment, more ammunition for Derek's manipulative games. So I kept my distance, focusing my energy on the legal battle that would decide the course of our future. With Elise's guidance, I pored over financial statements and witness testimonies, building an impenetrable case against the man who had once sworn to love and cherish me. The realization that our marriage had devolved into this bitter adversarial farce left a hollow ache in my chest. But I knew there was no going back, no chance of salvaging what had been lost. Derek had made his choices, and now he would have to face the consequences. As the divorce proceedings ground on, the media caught wind of our sordid drama, unleashing a torrent of salacious headlines and intrusive reporters. Derek, ever the opportunist, seized his chance to manipulate the narrative, granting exclusive interviews where he painted himself as the long-suffering victim of a deranged, money-hungry shrew. "She's out for blood, plain and simple," he lamented to one particularly eager journalist, his eyes glistening with crocodile tears. "All I ever wanted was to give my family a good life, but it was never enough for Raylan. She let her greed, her delusions of grandeur consume her." I watched in disgust as his lies played out across newspapers and television screens, each fabrication more outrageous than the last. But I refused to take the bait, to engage in the same mudslinging tactics that Derek had embraced so wholeheartedly. No, I would let the evidence speak for itself. The truth was on my side, and try as he might, Derek could never bury that beneath a mountain of deceit and slander. As the media frenzy reached a fever pitch, I found myself longing for the quiet solace of my work, the simple act of creation that had once brought me such joy and fulfillment. But even that refuge had been tainted, the very business I had poured my heart and soul into, now serving as a battleground between Derek and me. In my darkest moments, I wondered if it had all been worth it, the pain, the betrayal, the shattering of everything I had once held dear. But then I would look at Harper, my beautiful, struggling girl caught in the crossfire of her parents' war, and I would know that I had done the only thing I could. For her sake, and for my own self-respect, I had to keep fighting. No matter how high the cost, I would not let Derek emerge victorious from the ashes of our family. Not this time. The day of the final court hearing dawned cold and gray, the somber weather mirroring the weight that had settled over my shoulders. As Elise and I made our way through the courthouse doors, a phalanx of reporters descended upon us, cameras flashing and microphones thrust into our faces. "Miss Collins, is it true you're seeking full custody of your daughter? How do you respond to the allegations that you've been embezzling funds from your own company? Care to comment on the rumors of your husband's alleged affair?" I brushed past them without a word, my jaw clenched in grim determination. Derek, of course, was reveling in the spectacle, pausing every few steps to preen for the cameras and offer up sound bites tailored to paint him as the long-suffering victim. "All I've ever wanted is to protect my little girl," he simpered, his expression one of studied anguish. "But Raylan, she's become unhinged, obsessed with money and revenge. It's tragic, really." I felt Elise tense beside me, and I placed a warning hand on her arm. "Don't take the bait," I murmured. "He's not worth it." Her nostrils flared, but she gave a curt nod, and we continued on our way, leaving Derek to bask in the spotlight he so desperately craved. The courtroom was packed to the rafters, a veritable circus of lawyers, journalists, and gawking spectators. I scanned the crowd, my heart lurching as I spotted Harper sitting towards the back, her shoulders hunched and her gaze determinedly averted from both Derek and me. As the proceedings got underway, it became immediately apparent that the judge had little patience for Derek's grandstanding. He cut through the other man's bloated testimony with razor-sharp precision, dismantling his arguments one by one with cold, irrefutable logic. "You claim your wife was obsessed with money and revenge, Mr. Collins," the judge stated, his voice ringing with thinly veiled disdain. "And yet, the financial records clearly show that you embezzled over $500,000 from her company's accounts over the course of 5 years. How do you explain that?" Derek squirmed in his seat, his bravado faltering under the weight of the damning evidence. "It was a misunderstanding, Your Honor. I was simply lying and stealing from your wife, with whom you had entered into a legal contract as a business partner," the judge interrupted, his eyes flashing. "That's what the evidence shows, Mr. Collins. Shall I go on?" As the judge methodically disassembled Derek's house of lies, I could practically feel the weight lifting from my shoulders. Beside me, Elise radiated quiet triumph, her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. When the judge finally rendered his verdict, it felt like a physical blow, knocking the wind from Derek's sails and leaving him reeling. "In light of the overwhelming evidence presented, I am awarding Miss Collins full ownership of her company, as well as sole custody of her daughter, Harper. Mr. Collins, you are hereby ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $600,000, as well as alimony and child support to be determined at a later date." A stunned silence fell over the courtroom, broken only by the muted sobs of a devastated Derek. Elise reached over and squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it," she murmured. "It's over." But as I turned to face my daughter, my heart plummeted. Harper was staring at me, her expression unreadable, a chasm of hurt and betrayal stretching between us. In that moment, I knew that while the legal battle might be won, the war for my daughter's heart and trust was only just beginning. In the days that followed, Derek's world crumbled around him. His assets were seized, his reputation in tatters. But through it all, he maintained a defiant front, lashing out at anyone and everyone who dared cross his path. It was during one such outburst that Harper, who had been steadfastly avoiding me, finally emerged from the shadows of her self-imposed exile. "You're pathetic," she spat, her voice dripping with contempt as Derek raged and raved in the aftermath of yet another court ruling. "All this time, I thought Mom was the one destroying this family, but you're the real cancer, aren't you?" Derek whirled on her, his face contorted in an ugly snarl. "Watch your mouth, you ungrateful little—" "No, you watch yours." Harper stepped forward, her chin raised in defiant challenge. "I'm done listening to your lies, your manipulations. You're a sad, bitter man, and you've got no one to blame but yourself for the mess you've made of your life." As her words washed over him, I saw something shift in Derek's eyes, a flicker of doubt, of dawning realization that his carefully constructed facade was crumbling. For a heartbeat, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then the moment passed, and the sneer was back, twisted and grotesque. "You'll regret this," he hissed, jabbing a finger in Harper's face. "You and your bitch of a mother will regret the day you ever crossed me." Harper didn't so much as flinch. "Save it for someone who still cares, Dad. You're nothing but a pathetic bully, and I'm done being afraid of you." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Derek gaping in her wake like a landed fish. Our eyes met for the briefest of moments, and in that fleeting glance I saw a glimmer of the old Harper, strong, defiant, unbroken. In that moment, I knew that no matter what lay ahead, we would face it together, united, emboldened by the truth that had finally set us free. Derek might have lost everything, but I had regained something far more precious: my daughter's respect, her trust. And that was a victory worth fighting for. The weeks following the divorce were a whirlwind of activity. With Derek's vindictive presence finally excised from our lives, Harper and I were free to pick up the pieces and begin rebuilding. Gone were the tense silences, the hostile glares and cutting remarks. In their place was a newfound openness, a willingness to communicate and heal the wounds that had been left to fester for far too long. "I'm sorry, Mom," Harper murmured one night as we sat on the patio, nursing mugs of hot chocolate beneath the star-studded sky, "for the way I acted, for shutting you out when you needed me most." I reached over and squeezed her hand, my heart swelling with a potent mix of love and relief. "You have nothing to apologize for, sweetie. What's important is that we're here now, together. That's all that matters." She offered a tentative smile, and in that moment, I saw a glimpse of the carefree girl she had once been, untainted by the bitter rancor of her parents' war. The sight filled me with a renewed sense of determination. I would do whatever it took to shield her from further pain, to ensure that the damage wrought by Derek's actions did not define the rest of her life. With that goal in mind, I threw myself into resurrecting my fashion line, channeling all the fire and passion that had once fueled my every design. Harper, to my immense pride, joined me wholeheartedly, her artistic flair and keen eye breathing fresh life into my creations. "You know, this whole sustainability thing is actually kind of cool," she remarked one afternoon as we pored over a pile of discarded fabric swatches. "Who knew old rags could look so chic?" I laughed, reveling in the sound of her teasing lilt. "I tried to tell you, didn't I? But you were too busy mocking your poor, delusional mother." She pulled a face, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Yeah, well, I was young and stupid. Not to mention brainwashed by a certain lying snake of a father. The barb stung, but I knew there was no venom behind it, only the stark truth that we were both still coming to terms with." Reaching out, I cupped her cheek, marveling at the way she leaned into my touch rather than recoiling. "The important thing is, we're here now, together, and nothing is ever going to tear us apart again." The words felt like a vow, a solemn promise to the both of us. Harper's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she blinked them away, offering me a watery smile. "You're right. It's you and me against the world, Mom. Always and forever." As our new line began to take shape, the media caught wind of our triumphant reemergence, fueling a flurry of interest and speculation. Interview requests poured in, each more eager than the last to get the inside scoop on our phoenix-like rise from the ashes of scandal and betrayal. I dismissed them all with a polite but firm refusal. This story, our story, was not fodder for the gossip rags or salacious tell-alls. It was ours, a hard-won victory forged in the fires of pain and heartbreak. The only validation I needed was the look of pride in Harper's eyes as we put the finishing touches on our debut collection. Gone were the dark circles and haunted gaze. In their place was a radiant, effervescent joy that warmed me to my very core. "We did it, Mom," she breathed, running her fingers over the intricate stitching of one particularly striking ensemble. Against all odds, we actually pulled this off. Wrapping an arm around her shoulders, I pulled her close, savoring the moment. "Of course we did, baby girl. When have you ever known your mother to back down from a fight?" She laughed, the sound ringing like music through the bustling studio. Fair point. Though to be honest, I think it was my stubborn determination that really saved the day. "Is that so?" I arched an eyebrow, unable to resist the playful banter. "Well, in that case, maybe I should start calling you Mom instead." Harper made a face, sticking out her tongue. "On second thought, let's not go that far. One diva in the family is more than enough." We dissolved into a fit of giggles, the easy camaraderie a soothing balm on the wounds of the past. In that moment, it was as if the years of turmoil and heartache had never happened. We were just a mother and daughter, united in our love for each other and the craft that had helped heal us both. The night of our launch party, I could scarcely believe how far we'd come. Harper was radiant in one of our signature creations, her megawatt smile lighting up the room as she worked the crowd with effortless poise. Watching her charm and dazzle the assembled fashionistas and industry bigwigs, I felt a surge of pride so intense it nearly stole my breath away. This was her moment, our moment, and no one, not Derek, not the naysayers who had doubted us at every turn, could ever take that away. As the night drew to a close and the last of the well-wishers trickled out, Harper made her way over to me, her eyes sparkling with unbridled joy. "Well," she murmured, looping her arm through mine, "what did you think? Was it everything you dreamed it would be?" Pulling her close, I pressed a kiss to her temple, my heart so full I thought it might burst. "It was more than I ever could have imagined," I whispered fiercely, "and it's only the beginning, baby girl, for both of us." As we stood there, silhouetted against the twinkling lights of our newfound success, I knew that no matter what challenges the future held, we would face them head-on, side by side, unbroken, unstoppable, invincible. A mother and daughter, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the indomitable strength of our bond. Our story was far from over. It had only just begun.